Welcome to Helping Organizations Thrive. Today I have the pleasure of Tarin Calmeyer on the show. Welcome to you, Tarin.
Thank you so much for having me, Julian. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show. You are the founder and chief wellness officer of Remote Team Wellness. There's a clue in there what we might be talking about later on. Your business is the world's first fully live remote wellness solution for companies, and you provide live digital wellness coaching retreats and workshops for corporate clients. And we will be exploring remote workplace wellness challenges, trends, and opportunities. Before we get there, Tarin, what do you love about what you do?
Oh, what I really love about what I do is learning. So I'm a lifelong student, and I think that learning is probably one of the things that I value most, especially when it comes to my work. So I really love being able to create this company in response to the pandemic. And as obviously as the founder of a company, you are in the space. I read Hoffman says it's the best that you are in the space of kind of building a plane as it crashes to the ground. So yeah, so really in that space, I've really enjoyed learning and adapting and being flexible. It's also really in line with my life philosophy of like infinite flexibility is really the answer to being able to be adaptable, to being able to be open to change. And that's really what I love about what I get to do every single day, because also wellness is not this fixed thing. It is multidimensional. So it means there has to be different ways of looking at it. There has to be new ways of examining it. And that's why I love it.
And before we get into talking wellness and wellness in the workplace,
Mhm.
what was the journey for you in getting into wellness? Why wellness, and why are you so passionate about it? What's the thing that
Mm.
resonates with for you?
Yeah, so for me, it's actually kind of obviously a result, as all wellness practitioners, and it's all of us have had our own wellness journeys and our own well-being journeys. I grew up dancing, very active, and it wasn't until I got very badly injured that I actually really had to start to take a step back and look at how I was treating my body and how I was going to rehabilitate myself rather than just enforcing my own will on my body. Our bodies are so intuitive and so they're so built to give us what we need, but not always necessarily what we want. And so that was the kind of initiation phase of my journey of really having a space where I was injured and I could not do as the things that I usually could do. I couldn't function in the way that I usually could. And I had to actually sit with myself and figure out how I was going to make it better rather than think about why it was so bad right now. And that led me to yoga. That led me to actually studying osteopathy, which is a manual therapy. I know it's different in different places in the world, but osteopathy is a really incredible manual therapy that looks at the root cause of all dysfunction and disease. And so that journey really led me into a deeper understanding of obviously human anatomy, physiology, biomechanics, and that led me to really wanting to not only rehabilitate myself, but share information with other people about how to heal themselves, how to rehabilitate themselves, how to work with their bodies rather than against their bodies, because there's so much conflicting information that we have. And the body is really the first level of that information that's coming through to us at any moment. You know, you have a headache, you have a fever, you have a migraine. Your body is speaking to you all the time, and so that's something I wanted to understand a little bit more, and that's how my wellness journey began.
So it was a physical injury that caused you to get into this, and I guess
Yes,
um, it's interesting. You went into aspects of what I would call sort of mental health type things, yoga, meditation, which
absolutely.
obviously they're obviously intrinsically linked, aren't they? Our physical and our mental. I think often in life we try to separate it. You know, that's our
Yeah,
physical, that's our mental, but actually there's a link either way.
absolutely.
And just on that, in terms of, I guess, definition, we talk wellness. Is well-being, wellness the same for you? And we all sort of interchange with that. It'd be interesting to understand that. But also, how do you define wellness from your perspective?
So, okay, I'll answer well-being versus wellness after what is wellness for me. From my perspective, wellness is a holistic way of looking at your whole life. What is keeping you functioning, healthy, and optimally well? So that includes your mental, financial, environmental, emotional, physical health, all wrapped up into one package. So it's not just one thing. It's literally you as a whole human being, and what you're doing to maintain and keep yourself living at an optimal state of thriving, rather than just staying in a state of fight or flight, or in a survival mode. That's what wellness is to me. In terms of wellness versus well-being, wellness is again like that multidimensional concept of like, these are the different elements of
Mm.
wellness. Your well-being really has to do with, again, like how you are on a day-to-day level, and like how that's translating for you in the moment. So like well-being and wellness sometimes are interchangeable, but generally they are talking about separate things. More wellness is a little bit more big picture, whereas well-being is a little bit more like daily, tangible, how you're taking care of yourself. That makes sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. So one
Yeah.
is the more what you're going towards, I guess, almost like a wellness type strategy, sort of longer
Hmm.
term, and then the well-being is the how you executing on a daily basis. Would that be
Exactly.
that type of thing?
Totally. Absolutely. Like how you're being right now.
Yeah.
Well, and then wellness is like it's your journey. It's like what does that look like? How can you start to adapt for the things that you eventually want to join?
Now you mentioned a number of wellness aspects in your definition. And I've written down some of them, which are from a blog I read of yours as well.
Mm,
I mean, was it physical, emotional, occupational, environmental, intellect, social,
intellectual. Mm,
spiritual?
yeah.
Um, can you just pick a couple of those and just expand upon them? Because that means that feels a bit more holistic
Yeah.
and broadens that a little bit more than just it's making you feel. I feel happy. I've got good nutrition and I exercise and my workplace is a really nice place to work. But it's a bit more than that, isn't there?
Yeah, no, there's so much more than that. And that's again why wellness can't just be like pinpointed to one thing. Like you can't just say, "Oh, well, I went to the gym today. I am well." If you're going through some really intense emotional trauma or grief, that also really has to do with your overall wellness and your overall well-being. And so really making sure that you are addressing all of the elements. Obviously, you're not going to hit all of them in one go, but to look at each part of your life. And when I really build well-being strategies with clients, with organizations, we really do look at all of these individual factors, because they all add up to that whole. And I love that you use the word holistic, even though it's become slightly benign, and people use it just as a kind of blanket term of like, yes, it's holistic. But it really does have to do with the fact that you have to treat the whole you have to look at the whole in order to treat the parts. And
Mm.
making sure that there are different things being looked at. So socially, I know socially, for a lot of us, we had a huge drop off during the pandemic of being isolated and alienated from the people that we love, not being able to see our loved ones in person. But how were you looking after yourself socially? Were you still keeping those connections? I know a lot of people may have withdrawn themselves and just been in the state where they were in their homes and they didn't speak to anyone. But like socially, we all need to keep those connections up. And that may mean you have to reach out to people. That may mean that you have to actually make an effort to, send a message or join a support group or join something that you are feeding your need for social connection and your need for social engagement. That's just one example. Physically, we all need to move our bodies every single day. We're currently in another epidemic of sitting being a huge part of our culture. So we're all just sitting for hours and hours a day, not moving our bodies, and that can create some pretty detrimental long-term effects, if I'm being honest. So making sure that we're getting up and moving our bodies for at least 30 minutes a day is so important. That can look like whatever it feels good for you. Whatever feels good for you, whether it's getting up and taking a walk around your neighborhood, a walk around your house, maybe it's just doing a little bit of light Zumba, maybe it's doing a bit of yoga, maybe it's doing a bit of Tai Chi or stretching. Whatever it looks like, you have to move your body, and that's your physical obligation of being in this meat suit. It really does mean that you have to take care of it in these different ways and think about, again, what it means for you to be well. Then we're also now in Mental Health Awareness Month, and mental health is such a huge topic. Another pandemic that we are also in the midst of. Really not being able to, give ourselves what we need mentally, whether that's just time away from screens, that's time away from all the constant onslaught of notifications, alerts, media, news, all of the things that are constantly trying to pull at our attention that are really, really, again, detrimental to our mental health. So thinking about these things as parts really starts to add up to the whole picture. So maybe, obviously, you can't just hide yourself under a rock and hope that all of these things resolve themselves. But maybe it means setting boundaries around, like, I'm not going to wake up in the morning and just look at my phone instantly. I'm going to take a few moments and take a few deep breaths, just ground myself into my body, or I'm going to take a walk around my neighborhood, do some breathing. And that's going to be really good for my physical and my mental health. It's also probably going to be good for your emotional health, to clear your head, to get anything that you're feeling or thinking out. Maybe it means writing down some of the things that you're feeling. So giving yourself these small tools and practices and making them a practice, because that's also the thing about wellness. It's not just something that happens, you went to the gym and you checked your box. It's really something that has to be a practice, a daily routine. It's a lifelong journey. It's not just one and done.
And you've been talking a lot of stuff there, really good stuff, really helpful stuff, in terms of individuals there. And obviously it is about individuals ultimately. But thinking about organizations, thinking about workplaces, and thinking about how wellness is becoming an important foundation or aspect of an organization now, in terms of looking after your people and having that sense of responsibility. What's your view on where does the responsibility lie, in terms of, is it with the employee or is it with the employer, on the wellness of their people?
I think it lies with both, to be completely honest with you, because again, wellness actually really needs to be a cultural shift within the organization. So it needs to be something that is prioritized, just like I was saying, on a day-to-day basis. It is a practice. So if you're going to build a well-being culture in an organization, there need to be practices that are already, implemented into the culture. We have a Mindful Monday, or we have a quarterly break where we do a well-being activity together as a team. And those things become that consistent, it's a consistent show of exactly how much the organization cares about the wellness of the individual. If there is that representation and that care of the individual, then the individual has more onus to actually take care of themselves as well. So it's almost, it goes very much hand in hand, of like the organization showing that they care about the individual and the individual caring more about themselves. So whether it's something that, again, may get sent out as a weekly wellness email or a weekly well-being tip. It's so easy to implement these things, to just send out, here are a few stretches that you can do at your desk in order to help your employees, feel like they can move their bodies a little bit more. Maybe you send out a notification every single day at noon to get up and walk away from your screen just for a 5-minute break. Maybe it means, setting a mindful moment right before your meetings, where everyone just takes a breath together. These are things that can be very easily implemented into a workplace culture that then again starts to get people thinking about how they can start implementing these things into their own lives, into their own days. And it's all just a knock-on domino effect of wellness.
And have you got an example? You have to name the company, but a company you've worked with where you've not only done those, I suppose I would say, the tactical things you're talking about, but made it a bit more I suppose, a strategic cultural part of their business, and they've actually seen a difference, and it's actually not only impacted the wellness of their people, however they measure that. I'm sure there's ways of measuring it. Lots of apps out there now, lots of surveys, all sorts of things, engagement surveys and all that type of thing, and productivity and profits. Have you got an example? You must have a few that you've picked up in the last couple of years.
Absolutely. So one of my favorite examples, because it was just so stark to see how much it shifted once the company actually started prioritizing it. We worked with a tech company that was remote first and remote forever. So they were a remote only company. They had never worked in person together. They'd all been virtually onboarded. So they had a very disconnected company culture. They didn't necessarily all, want to be on screen with each other as a team. And when they were extremely disconnected, disengaged. Everyone was working on their own things. So we started just implementing a mindful Monday where we literally just did 10 minutes of breathing exercises for this team.
And you would initiate this for them, as in take the class.
So we have our facilitators who do the sessions for us. And at first they were like, we don't have more than 10 minutes. We only have 10 minutes for this. It's not possible that anyone will give you more attention than 10 minutes. So you know what? I love it. I love a good challenge, and so we definitely took that. We took that on. We did this 10-minute breathing exercise with them every single Monday, and their team was really, again, everyone's cameras were off when we first started. Everyone was really disconnected. We asked, like, hey, where are you joining from? Please, like, let us know where you're at. Let us know how this feels for you. First session, not a whole lot of engagement. But those 10 initial people came back to the second session. Then that second session, more people were on the session and maybe one person's camera was on. Then the whole team was on the next session and 2 people's cameras were on. And then slowly over the weeks that we were doing it, more people started to come on camera, more people started to come on screen. And it was so interesting to see how just implementing this thing that was not a Zoom meeting, not just a talking head at the screen, that was actually asking for participation, actually engaging these people as people rather than as just, like bots behind a computer screen, really started to actually engage them into realizing that, this is something that really makes me feel good in my body. And now we're up to 45-minute sessions twice a week. And that's a really, really fantastic thing to just have as a practice for their team, because it's really grounding to connect to your breath. And we always talk about the breath being maybe the simplest but most potent way to bring yourself into a state of productivity, a state of focus, a state of creativity, because it takes you out of your head and out of that very, mentally swirling space back into your body and back into your rest, digest, and de-stress response. We have so much information now about our fight or flight response, our sympathetic nervous system really getting activated. And a lot of us are living in that state day to day. We're all living in this really highly wired, highly reactive state where everything has to be done right now. And everything is a threat. And that is a very primal part of our human nature. It is a very ancient part of our reptilian brains. However, now that we have more information, we are in a different time, we're in a different space. We now have this information to be able to use our tools, our breath being one of them, to, again, regulate ourselves, to bring ourselves out of the state of, actually, my colleague who sent me an email last night at a time that I really couldn't respond is not a saber-toothed tiger that's threatening my life. It's just something that I need to set boundaries around, It's something that I need to then bring myself into my state of, actually, this is not going to work for me right now, but maybe I can respond to this in a different kind of way rather than reacting and flying off the handle. And that's, again, it is the simplest way to bring ourselves back to our natural state.
So that company went from 10 minutes to 45 minutes, once a week, twice a week, which in itself is a success. What did you get any understanding of the benefits that coming back in terms of feedback or productivity or just the culture of the business? Was there other sort of things you could pick up on?
Yeah, I think the one huge piece of feedback is that it was so nice to have the company actually give them an initiative that showed that they cared, that the company cared about them as individuals. And again, it was something that was completely optional. We did not mandate it for the team. We did not force the team to show up. People just spoke about it and spoke about how effective it was for them. They've also started a wellness Slack channel now where they share different resources. They share different well-being books, different, like, and I saw them sharing meditations. I saw them sharing different things that really again, I'm not recommending these things, but these are things that people can then start to connect over, because if it works for one person, it probably works for someone else. And these are just things that can also build that deeper team bond and team connection to actually make it a human first experience rather than, again, a digital experience. Because we have so many Zoom meetings. We're all living on Zoom. And so to make something a little bit more than just a Zoom meeting, to really engage people, engage their senses, engage what they're thinking, engage where they are at as individuals, is so necessary as well. Because just living on Zoom and being like from meeting to meeting to meeting, obviously Zoom fatigue is a very real thing. So really starting to address that on a tangible and actionable level is important.
And it seems like that what you did with that company, that they had an intent, they had a commitment to it as well, and the fact that you've been doing it, I don't know for how long, but probably still doing, I presume. Is that still happening now? Is it? Yeah. So you've embedded something which is obviously then shifts culture and has really had a real positive impact.
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on where people think, I want to address this wellness thing, and therefore I need to bring in somebody, perhaps yourself, who will do a few webinars here, a few Monday motivational things, or Mindful Monday, whatever it may be, and dare I say, like sticking plaster on the whole thing. I mean, how do we address that? How do we sort of challenge that, I guess? And I'm sure you might have clients who perhaps come to you with that sort of thinking.
Absolutely. And yeah, that's also that was one of the reasons that we tried to veer away and stop doing just once-off sessions, because we were just seeing teams see it as something that they could just do once for their team, and then it's one and done. And like, now you're well, right? We did a stress reduction webinar. You're good for the rest of the year. However, there's so many more things that need to happen. There's more follow-up, and it really comes down to consistency. It really comes down to, again, making it a part of the actual culture, so that there is that change to be like, this is something we just expect from our organization, because this is what our organization stands for. It's a pillar of your actual manifesto. You have to have that as that well-being almost built in and integrated into the very fiber of the organization. It can't just be, we had a webinar and now everything's okay. There need to be, firstly, wellness is a C-level conversation. It's not just an HR function. HR has enough to do. HR has enough to worry about, and people and experience and all of these things. They have enough to think about in terms of how their people are engaging and all of that. This comes from a leadership level, and that really means leaders taking care of themselves, so that this trickles down in the organization. If leaders are going on different retreats and having time together to think about, how are we keeping ourselves well? How are we thinking about the wellness of our organization? That trickles down all the way down to the employee that's just been onboarded, and really needs the support of their leaders, because their leaders will be checking in with them and being like, how are you finding it here? How is this going for you? It's already ingrained into the culture. And that's really what it takes. It takes a top-down change and a top-down transformation. So that means consistency, and that means committing to this in a long-term scale.
Yeah, it's important to make sure any cultural change is a top-level sort of initiative and a strategic intent that needs to be done. And you made another valid point there about it's that role modeling piece. It's all very well making it a strategic intent. Actually, the individuals at leadership level have to start doing it themselves. And whether that's making sure they turn up to any events that perhaps you've organized, or demonstrating, being more mindful for meetings, and to almost be the role model, because that's what people pick up on. That's what people see and go, well, they're doing it. They're walking the talk, so to speak. That's really important, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. That's what leadership is. It's about walking what you're talking and actually believing what you are saying, and showing people that is what you believe, rather than just fancy words. Because so many people are jumping on these bandwagons. Yes, wellness and sustainability, and yeah, we're here for the change. But are you actually living it? That is really what it's going to take for the business to succeed and to move forward.
So just going back to, you mentioned breathing techniques, and you talked a lot about breathing, which is interesting, because I don't know, you've obviously heard of Wim Hof, I presume, in terms of the Iceman.
Yeah.
I've been doing cold water swimming since January this year.
Wonderful.
And started to feel the benefits of that in terms of mindfulness with it, because you're in the moment, very much in the moment when you're cold, and the celebration of success of doing it itself. And then also I do it with friends, so it's just like a social aspect to it all. And I've not got much into the breathing as yet, although I did have a cold shower today for the first time. I realized that's quite intense. So just, it'd be interesting, how do we bring the breathing aspect into the workplace without being weird or strange or odd? Because, do you know what I mean? That could be a little bit seem as, got this Tarin, you can talk about breathing. We can't start doing breathing techniques in a meeting before. How does that work?
Honestly, it all starts with awareness. And to be honest, the thing is, most of us don't think about our breath. We don't think about it. So the entry to a breathwork practice is to just become aware of your breath, to become aware of how you're breathing, where you're breathing. Is your breath sitting up here in your chest? Because usually that chest breath is associated with our fight or flight response. We're in this moment of like, something happens, we hold our breath. And we never really allow that breath to move down and travel into our shoulders. And you see, when I take deeper breaths, my shoulders drop, my voice gets a little bit deeper. I ground a little bit more into my diaphragm. That's why, anyone who has been trained in any kind of speaking has some training around breathing, because you have to understand how to control your breath when you speak, or when you sing, or when you're projecting your voice in any way. And that means, again, taking breaths that are into your belly. And the belly also helps, obviously there's so many different vital organs that we are stimulating when we send our breath down into our belly, specifically our gut, and our phrenic nerve, which is innervating all of those vital organs as well. So that really helps to start to regulate and activate our rest, digest, de-stress response, or our parasympathetic nervous system. So again, if you think about the nervous system, there's two parts: the sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, and parasympathetic nervous system, rest, digest, de-stress. So if you're thinking sympathetic, it's all up here in your head, and these are things that, one, obviously when you're under attack, all of those resting responses are going to shut off, because they're not necessary if you're actually trying to run for your life or to survive. However, we're not always in survival mode. So giving ourselves that opportunity to come into a rested state helps us to be clearer and more focused. And again, that just comes with awareness of like, am I just breathing like this? That's not very relaxed breathing. That is breath that is you're running from a predator, I'd hope. However, if you really start to think about it and you start to move it down and just take some deeper breaths. And maybe it's just setting a timer at the top of every hour. It doesn't have to be a whole, spiritual experience where you're doing these like kinds of breaths like Wim Hof sometimes purports in breathwork, because you need those breaths when you're jumping into cold water. Sometimes you do need that, because it brings you back into your present, and it does help you, because you are in a survival state when you're jumping into freezing cold water, because your body's trying not to die from hypothermia. However, if you are actually trying to just, send a casual email or check in with some colleagues after a meeting or write up a proposal, you don't need that. You don't need that stress. So maybe even just before you start a new activity at work, just become aware of, how am I breathing right now? Where is my breath traveling? Am I holding my breath? Am I letting my breath move into my belly? Maybe taking a hand and putting it on your belly and just taking a nice full breath, long breath out, and then continuing with the rest of your work, because that can also very easily just bring you right back into the present moment, right into your current state, rather than being in the future or in the past. And that's often so often where we live when we don't need to.
That's really helpful, and I like that. The fact that you can literally do it at your desk, and it's not a thing, and it's almost, as you say, it goes back to what you said before, this creating daily habits, being sustainable, consistency, and you touched on, I think, there a whole host of stuff about that self-awareness piece of, why am I feeling like this? What's triggering this, and being more mindful of that. And as you say, you get that when you're more in the moment, and just by stopping to know your breath actually causes you to be in the moment, just by anything else. You can't do anything else except just think about your breath, and that's really helpful. I could talk for you for a long time, Tarin. Fascinating stuff, interesting stuff. If people are really interested in what you're talking about, and a bit more about your company that does remote wellness, how may they sort of get in touch with you and connect with you?
Amazing. Well, yeah, if you're interested in connecting with me, I am Tarin Calmeyer on all the social medias. I'll spell that out. TarinCalmeyer. I'll also send you all my links to my LinkedIn, my Instagram, and whatnot. And I share a lot of different well-being techniques and wellness techniques to help with all of this in the everyday, and help integrate these tips into your life. If you're interested in working with Remote Team Wellness, you can find us at remoteteamwellness.com, or on all the social medias at Remote Team Wellness.
Thank you very much for your time today, Tarin.
Thank you so much for the conversation. I've really enjoyed talking to you, Gillian. Thank you.